To preserve the beautiful floral decorations and the elegant face mask, archaeologists have refused to physically unwrap the mummy of the ancient Egyptian pharaoh. But luckily, after 140 years of its discovery and 2 unsatisfactory x-rays, the mummy of Pharaoh Amenhotep I was first unwrapped after about 3,500 years of its original mummification using CT scanners. In today's video, you will find out what was inside this scary Egyptian mummy. In 1881, a strange Egyptian mummy was discovered during exploration and excavation in the southern part of Egypt in Deir el-Bahari. The strange mummy was later identified to be a pharaoh's mummy. There are several mummies of pharaohs have been previously discovered in the ruins of ancient Egypt, but this newly discovered mummy was that of a very prominent pharaoh, Amenhotep I. Amenhotep I began his reign in ancient Egypt in the year 1525 BCE. His reign was the beginning of great things for the ancient Egyptians. Ancient Egypt had earlier been greatly affected by several wars until the reign of Amenhotep I, whose reign began to usher in great prosperity to the land. His reign didn't just bring prosperity to the land, it also brought peace, because peace had begun to reign in the land and war had almost been completely wiped out in Egypt. During Amenhotep I's reign, he was able to build several new temples, like the one in Karnak, near Luxor. Do you wonder how Amenhotep I began his reign? The young Amenhotep tasted power for the first time in his entire life when he began co-ruling with his father, Ahmes. His mother, Ahmes-Nefertari, joined him as a co-regent after the death of his father. After some years, Amenhotep got married to one of his sisters. As the pharaonic tradition was, they married their siblings to keep the pharaonic bloodline pure. After some years of peaceful reign, Amenhotep I died in 1504 BCE. Amenhotep I and his mother, Queen Ahmes-Nefertari, both became patron deities in Egypt. They were both worshipped by the ancient Egyptians for more than 800 years. In truth, one would have considered a man during his reign, peace and prosperity were restored to the land after several years of war and turmoil to be nothing but a god. What else do men seek God for? To have peace and prosperity, right? But you might not have valued peace so much if you had never experienced war in the past. Those whose eyes have seen war and its devastating effects would do nothing but live in absolute reverence for the ones who restored peace and prosperity to their land. That was the case with the ancient Egyptians. To them, Amenhotep I was more than a savior and restorer. The mummy of Amenhotep I deserved to be preserved with jealousy. When the mummy of this great ancient pharaoh was discovered, several other well-preserved corpses were also found at the same site. But being a pharaoh, you expect more attention to be given to his corpse, though other corpses weren't despised either. It was scary that the mummy of Pharaoh Amenhotep I was still very intact. Instead of unwrapping the pharaoh's mummy, the archaeologists decided to keep it without any additional examination carried out on it. Although there was so much curiosity as to what the inside of this pharaoh's mummy looked like, no one wanted to disrupt the facial masks and wrappings that remained unimpaired for thousands of years. Since they didn't want to physically unwrap the pharaoh's mummy, their curiosity about what the long-preserved body would look like was high. The archaeologists have to dance to the beat of another drummer. They have to depend not on what they alone could do, but on what other scientists could help figure out. So in the 1930s, the pharaoh's mummy was made to pass through an X-ray machine twice to scan what was inside. But the results from these scans weren't satisfactory enough to satisfy their longing souls about the pharaoh's mummy. Something greater was expected to be done since they were not still ready to physically unwrap the pharaoh's mummy. A computerized tomography scanning machine was adopted to be used in digitally unwrapping the pharaoh's mummy since a previous couple of X-rays didn't bring out satisfactory results. The mummy of Pharaoh Amenhotep I, which has already been placed in a museum in Cairo since its discovery in 1881, was first examined visually by looking at its exteriors. After this, it was placed in the CT scanning machine. To get detailed CT images and create a 3D dataset, they used scalpel tools to peel off the virtual layers of the pharaoh's mummy so that they could digitally unwrap it. In general, royal mummies were the best preserved ancient Egyptian bodies ever found. These mummies reveal a lot to us about the ancient people, most especially how kings and queens looked. Their health, ancient diseases, how mummification was carried out in their time, and how they made their funerary objects such as amulets, jewelry, coffins, shabtis, and funerary masks. You wouldn't believe what was found in the mummy of Pharaoh Amenhotep I when it was digitally unwrapped. Take a minute to imagine what could be in this pharaoh's mummy. You may be right or wrong in your thinking about what was found in the pharaoh's mummy, but let's see what was right inside that royal mummy. The first amazing discovery on the mummy of Pharaoh Amenhotep I was that his forearms were crossed in front of his chest. His mummy was the pioneer of this fashion of burial with crossed forearms upon the chest. This wasn't the end of the discoveries from the digital unwrapping of the mummy of Pharaoh Amenhotep I. A male figure of about 5 feet 6 inches tall, his left ear was pierced and he had a circumcised penis. Amenhotep I's age was also resolved through his recent discovery. He was about 35 years old when he died, meaning that Amenhotep I reigned for 21 years. His head mask was made of cartonnage, and the eyes were made of inlaid stone. From his appearance, it was believed that Amenhotep I bore a resemblance to his father, Whas. He had curly hair, a narrow nose, a narrow chin, and mildly bulging upper teeth. His cause of death could not be justified by the things that they discovered about his body because he had no wounds or disfigurement as a result of the disease. The only things they saw were several mutilations post-mortem, which was presumed to be by grave robbers who attacked the pharaoh's mummy after his first burial. His viscera, except his brain and heart, had been removed by the first mummifiers. After the pharaoh's mummy was recovered from the grave robbers, the 21st dynasty priests undertook a vast repair of the mummy. The detached head was fastened with a resin-treated linen band, and the limbs and fingers were reattached. The bandages that were loosened were tightened, and 2 new amulets were placed in the mummy. The priests of the 21st dynasty indeed did an amazing job on the mummy of Pharaoh Amenhotep I. The mummy was restored to its former grandeur, with all its jewelry and amulets restored. Afterlife is a very strong belief that the ancient Egyptians held onto when someone died. They believed that a dead person still had a life to live after death. To enable that dead fellow to reach the afterlife, the ancient Egyptians would mummify the dead body. They believed that the afterlife could only exist if the soul could have a form to repossess after death, and the only means to that was through mummification. The body will remain recognizable. Because of this belief, the ancient Egyptians took their time through all the processes of mummification. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs usually started preparations for their burial while they were still alive. They build their tombs when they are still alive. After their death, the chief embalmer comes for the mummification of the deceased pharaoh. The chief embalmer is usually a priest and always wears a mask of Anubis. I know you will wonder what an Anubis is. Anubis was the jackal-headed god of the dead who was connected with mummification and embalming. That is why the priests who served as chief embalmers always put on the mask of Anubis. Ancient Egyptians placed so much value in mummification that they were always ready to go through the rigors of mummifying their dead, especially when it was a pharaoh. Mummification is mostly done for pharaohs and other wealthy people who can afford it. That means mummification is a no-go area for the poor. To mummify a body, they start by inserting a hook through a hole close to the nose and hauling out the brain. They will also bring out the viscera by cutting the left side of the tummy. Then the viscera would be sawed out and dried. The lungs, intestines, stomach, and liver would be placed in canopic jars, and the heart would be returned to the body. But before that, the inside of the body would be washed with wine and spices. After this, the corpse would be covered with natron salt for 70 days. That's a whole lot of work, right? But that's not the end of it. On the 40th day, the corpse would be wrapped with linen or sand to maintain its human shape. Then, on the 70th day, the body would be fully wrapped from head to toe with bandages and placed in a sarcophagus. A sarcophagus is a coffin-like box used by ancient Egyptians for burial purposes. But for pharaohs, it's a bit different. The royal corpses are instead placed in special burial chambers, possibly the ones the pharaoh had prepared for himself during his lifetime. Lots of treasure, mostly gold, is placed with the body in these burial chambers. Other objects such as amulets and shabtis are usually placed with the treasures because they believe such objects would serve to protect the dead in the afterlife. The tradition of the ancient Egyptians was such a rich one, and it will always be fascinating to us and the ages to come. Thank you for watching. For mysterious discoveries, kindly subscribe and turn on post notifications to be updated on our latest videos.